All right, everyone. Thank
Rosemary.
you for everyone who came. Rose and Delaney and Anna are going to present on GitHub today. Take it away.
Sorry, as soon as I started sharing my screen, I couldn't find the unmute button. Hello, everyone. I'm Rose. I'm a junior. I use she, her pronouns. I'm majoring in computer science and English. And before doing this, I would consider myself below a GitHub novice. So we're learning alongside with you, and we also, I don't know, we're also kind of noobs, but I feel like that's helpful.
Yep, definitely noobs. I'm Delaney. I'm a senior. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a CS major and a Spanish minor. Yeah, so let us teach you what we just learned. So today we're going to talk about some slightly more advanced concepts, including Git workflow, like cloning, branching, and forking, and how those things are different and when you would use them. We're going to talk about merging and merge conflicts, and we're going to have Anna do a demo about merge conflicts, which we're very excited about. And then we're going to show you some tools that are going to make your Git workflow easier. So let us begin with the Git workflow, which is how you can integrate Git into your team projects, because hopefully you all have projects that you can, contribute to. So cloning is the essence of Git. Git works by making clones or snapshots of your code everywhere you need it so that you can make changes and updates and everything like that. So let's talk about contributing to a project. There are two sort of ways that you can contribute to a project. One of them is a fork-based workflow, where a lot of the time, if you're working on contributing to something that's open source, you would probably be forking because they wouldn't want you to just create your own branch on their project. And it sort of, I guess, it makes it so that you have to make your own version of the repository before you can actually, make changes to it. And then the branch-based workflow, which is a lot more common and is something you'll probably do if you're working on team projects or anything like that, which is basically you have one main branch and then you make branches off of that have different things on them. We'll talk about what that means. So first, let's talk about how to fork. So forking is going to happen in GitHub itself. It's not something you're going to do from the command line. You're going to start by navigating to the repository of choice. Here we have Rose's beautiful GitHub Workshop 2 repository. And you can see all it has right now is a README file, and there are no forks, and yeah, that's it. So you can click the fork button in the top right corner, which is going to, create a fork of Rose's repository. So I clicked fork, and then you can see up at the top, it says my username, Fowler22D, and then this is my forked version of the repository. And you can see below, it also says forked from Rose Sheehan, which, is helpful to know where you got it from. And you can click on it and go back to hers. And then something else that's cool is if you go back to Rose's version of the repository, and you can either click Insights and then click Forks, or up in the top corner where it says fork, you can click the 1, and it'll show you a little tree of all the different forks that exist of this repository. So you can see that mine is now part of the tree. So to review that, it's pretty simple. We're just in GitHub. You click the fork button on the repository of choice, and then you can see your forked version. So let's talk about why you might fork. One of them is something called branch protection rules, which would be when somebody sort of chooses not to let you branch, they set a setting that says that you can't make branches. And so in that situation, you would make a fork because you can't branch. And another reason that you might fork is if you want to take a project in a new direction. So maybe you want to take a project that you've been working on, and now you want to add an entirely new feature to it, or you want to delete something or change something, but you don't want to ever put it back onto the main branch of the project because you're like, this is my own thing. Or maybe you're like making a project and you need to base your code off of somebody else's like thing that already exists. You can fork in that situation too.
All right, so now we've got the idea of forking, which is kind of making your own version of a repository. Before we jump into talking about branches, we're just going to review really quickly how to get a copy of GitHub, of a repository from GitHub down to your local computer that you can work with it. So on GitHub, you'll click this code button here, and then you'll copy this URL. And then you can go over to your terminal and navigate to the desired folder. So I wanted to put this repository on my computer in a folder called GitHub Demos. You can see right now, this is what GitHub Demos looks like. It just has a couple files from the last workshop that we did. Then you'll run this git clone command, and that will clone, like we said, everything is kind of a clone. So this will make a local clone of the repository. And you can see now in my GitHub's demo folder, there's a new folder and it's called GitHub Workshop 2. And that's the copy of the GitHub version down locally. Just to review those steps really quick, if there's a project on GitHub and you want to work on it on your computer, so if you want to do any coding, you're going to copy the repository link from GitHub. You're going to go to your terminal and navigate to the desired folder. And then you're going to run the git clone command, which is going to make that copy of the repository locally for you. Once you do that, then you're all set. You can start coding. This is a little file that I made. I just typed it up. It prints out some numbers. And you just save it in your folder that you just cloned down. So the GitHub Workshop 2 folder is what it's called for me. And as you can see, I saved fun.py in there.
Okay, so Rose has just made these changes, but she did it right on the main branch of her local repository, which maybe she doesn't want to do. So let's talk about branching. So why would you want to branch? There are a couple of reasons. One of them is you want to track who's contributing what, so you can have different people working on a project and you can have them create their own branches so that as they're making changes and adding features and whatever, they're like, you can see directly that their branch is the one that has those changes. You might also want to isolate individual features. So say you have like some project and you want to add feature X and feature Y and they're not related to each other. So you like create a branch for feature X and you just like finish up feature X and then you put it onto your main branch and then you can do feature Y. And then the third reason is to build up the story of your code, which is like GitHub keeps track of the history of changes. So you can make branches to sort of like chunk the changes into different parts so that they all sort of fall into like, you know, branches. So here is how we contribute to a project using branching. So Rose, you know, realized her mistake. She realized that she had not created a branch to make these changes. So first she runs git status and she can see that she's on the main branch and she's like, oh no. So luckily, because she hasn't committed her change, she can run git checkout -b, which git checkout will either switch to a branch that exists, or if you give it a branch that doesn't exist, it will create the branch for you. So you can see that Git is like, all right, we switched to a branch and it's a new branch and it's named fun. So if she runs status again, she can see that she's now on the branch called fun instead of the branch main. And it has some files that have not been added, so they're not staged. So they show up in red. So because Rose is very good at following the instructions that Git gives her, she runs git add, which for those of you who were at our first workshop, you might remember the like diving board metaphor. So by running git add, she has put her change on the diving board, and it is like standing on the edge, getting ready to jump off into the pool. And then she runs git commit with a message, and that's her like pushing it into the pool. So now it's like on the repository, and it's being tracked. And so then she runs git push, but because she made her branch locally instead of on the remote repository, it gives us a little error message that tells us that there isn't a remote branch for us to put this onto. So because Git is nice to us, it gives us a little example of how you should run it. So you can do git push, and then you can set the upstream branch to something called fun, which is the same as our branch down on the local repository. So Rose runs that and then puts it right onto her repository. Okay, it's a lot. Does anyone have any questions about how that works? Yeah.
Can you give an example of like how you might decide why you might branch, like why you might create a branch? Like, is it for a specific feature, or like, okay, I'm creating like my branch that I'm going to work on all my stuff?
I think you could kind of do either. From what I understand, I think it makes sense to create like branches for different features as opposed to just like the Emily branch. Because if you're making, like, if you're creating a feature that like, you know, maybe you're making like a game piece and that's like important for like Rose's game logic, you wouldn't want to just like make it and then keep it and not ever push it and then like keep making things on your branch. So I think it would make more sense to have like, you know, you make your game piece branch and then you create your game piece and then you can push it back on. And then later on when Rose is making the logic for her game, she has your piece. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so.
Rose, any input?
No, that's my understanding as well, that like you can do both, but feature-based is more popular because you might be working on multiple features. And if you just have it based on your name, then that's kind of confusing. Like, what if you're working on game piece and then you switch over to like UI and they're both on the Emily branch? That feels a little confusing.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? I think we'll keep plowing ahead then. So our next section is about merging and merge conflicts. So up to now, we've sort of been thinking about working on your own branch or on your own fork, or sort of in isolation from maybe other people who are contributing to the project. But eventually Emily doesn't just want to have her game piece in her game piece branch. She's going to want to merge it onto main so that other people can use it. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you do that and what issues might arise. And I'm going to move you guys out of the way. There we go. So what exactly is merging? There's sort of two different ways to think about merging. One is doing merging locally. So this is more typical if it's like a repository that you're working on versus like an open source project. So in this case, on your local terminal or IDE, you can combine changes from your branch and pull them into main. If you're working in like a shared repository or something that you forked, you're more likely to, on GitHub, create a pull request and merge from there. We're going to go into more detail about sort of what the steps are for doing each of these things. And we have this nice metaphor to think about merging. So if we think about merging, similar to merging onto a highway. So if your branch or fork is a local road that you are driving down, making some changes, and then you eventually want to merge back into main, and you sort of are your car moving onto the main road, onto that highway. And just to clarify, merging isn't something you will do all the time. You're going to do it once you've solidified your changes on your branch and you sort of figure it out. This is like the solid working version of what I want, and I want to share it out with other people. So that first, the way that we talked about merging, if you're going to be doing it locally, you're going to do sort of the regular GitHub flow that we talked about last time, where you'll save the file you're working on, you'll stage the changes that you want to get merged, and then you'll commit those changes. After that, you can switch to the branch you want to merge your changes into. So say I wanted to merge my changes on fun.py, I would switch to the branch main, and then you're going to merge your changes in, and you'll push that to GitHub because you've modified main and you want to update the main that's on GitHub so that everyone else can use it. Quickly to go through the commands that you do this with. To stage is the git add command. To commit is git commit. To switch branches, kind of like we talked about earlier, you use this checkout command. So in our case, we would do git checkout main. And then to merge changes, you do git merge, and then the branch that you want to merge the changes in from. So I would do git merge fun, because that was the name of my branch. And then you can run this git push command to update main. If you're thinking about merging on GitHub, you'll do the same first 3 steps. So you'll save, you'll stage, you'll commit. But then instead of switching the branch that you're on, you'll push your changes from your local branch up onto GitHub, onto the remote repository. So that's similar to what we saw earlier with fun.py. So then if you were on GitHub, you would see like your fun branch has fun.py in it, and you can make a pull request on GitHub, and you'll request like, please merge my changes on the fun branch into the main branch. So this is kind of what it looks like. Whoop, sorry, I keep having to move you guys on the Zoom. You'll do those 3 regular commands, git add, git commit, git push. And then this is an example of a repository that I'm actually working with right now. And you can see there's a pull request button right over here. And you can just click that and make a pull request to pull the changes from my game logic branch into main. So that's great and all, but sometimes issues can come up when you're trying to do this. And the reason that these issues come up is if the copy of main that you're working off of is different than what's actually on main right now. So there's a discrepancy if someone else worked on something and modified main in a way that Git doesn't really understand how your new changes relate to this new main. This is called a merge conflict, and it'll typically occur when multiple people have edited the same file. Oops, sorry. How do I go back? There we go. When multiple people have edited the same file. And if we extend our highway metaphor, if you think about you're about to merge onto the highway and then there's some other cars in your lane because other people have made changes, and you're going to have to manually figure out, okay, how do I get onto this highway? How am I going to merge what's there with what I have? So we've got a little demo from Anna talking about resolving merge conflicts. So I'm going to stop my share and let her go ahead.
Thanks so much, Rose. Just a quick intro, because sometimes I feel like I'm just Zoom bombing this call. My name is Anna Rosenthal. I work at GitHub. I started there in January, and this is my 3rd software engineering job. So if any of you or anybody who's watching this later are interested about what I do day to day, what I did before, and why I chose to work at GitHub, feel free to reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn, or I'm sure Delaney and Rose can also share my email. But today we actually wanted to go over resolving merge conflicts. And I hope, this is going to be like this little silly game. I hope you can see my screen. Okay, great. And you can hear me. Also, sometimes my headphones like go out of power, so let's hope it doesn't happen now. But just to give you some context on what you're seeing on the screen, so I use my favorite IDE, and there are a lot of IDEs that you can use, but I remember in school I didn't use them that much. I mostly kind of like wrote my code in Sublime or wrote it. I think I used something else for Java, but since I started working full time, I use a lot of IntelliJ products. So you're looking at ID of IntelliJ called PyCharm, and then they have one for each language. So I used JetBrains a lot. I also use Golang for programming in Go, and then there's WebStorm and Writer and RubyMine and so on. But to give you context of what happened before, like we got where we got, I cloned Rose's repo. I checked out her very first commit where she did not have a fun.py file. So, and what I did, you can see that this fun.py is in green. So I created my own file. And if you think about it, she showed you how she created that fun.py file at some point, right? So here comes a merge conflict because each of us wants to add a file called the same thing, right? It's fun.py. It's one scenario for merge conflict. Typically, merge conflicts also arise when we're working on the same file and we're modifying it because Git wants to really know, okay, so what's the source of truth in terms of for this file specifically? What would you like me to say? And here I am just saying like, hey, I have completely different file and I want you to use this. So I'm going to play this just a little bit for you, this recorded demo in terms of what's going to happen next. So I just copied a single line. I did not want to write more code, but in real life, you'll clearly write more. And I'll pause here just a little bit. So you can see my very first command where I am kind of like you see, probably cannot see my cursor, but like the very first command that you see starts with 569. This is me checking out Rose's very first commit where there was no file. Then I'm creating my own branch that I called merge conflict. And I use a lot of shortcuts. So you will see me, like you kind of get tired from typing git blah over and over again. So I'll show you how I created aliases and my shortcuts a little bit like as we go through the demo. But when I type S, I'm actually asking Git, show me Git status. So S stands for Git status. And it tells me that we have this new file. And it also shows me that it was modified. And what I do next is, this is my shortcut for git add for what Rose said was staging. So I'm telling Git, hey, can you please add this file? And it does. And then I'm also gonna I think actually it's going to tell me, this is really interesting as a software engineer, I actually forgot that I have to commit first. So I will struggle trying to switch to main here, but eventually I would say it will tell me. So it shows me two branches, right? Git branch, main, and merge conflict. I'll try this again because I am convinced that this is going to work, but I'm definitely not following Rose's advice here. Eventually, I will remember that I have to commit. So I will write a commit message. I will not push it. I will just try to create a commit. And now I can switch branches. So now I will remember to go to the main. I will pull the version, right? So now I'm getting the version of the repo that includes Rose's change, the file that she added. And you can see, if you like dig into what comments we're getting here, it will actually say that there are new branches, there are new commits. So I'm getting the most updated version that Git has. And I will switch back to my merge conflict, my local branch, and I will try to rebase. So the shortcut that I'm using is rebase main. And unfortunately, it's old, so it still uses master, but I'll also struggle with that part a little bit. It will tell me there's no shortcut like this. So here are my shortcuts. I shared with Delaney my gist with all of this. You're welcome to use them. And I'm also happy to go over how to set it up. So I'm trying to remember okay, so what is the actual command that I need? That's one downside of using shortcuts, you forget what they are. But now we are going to resolve this conflict, right? So Git tells us, hey, there's a conflict and it's a merge conflict in this file PY, because in my local version, as you can see back in my IDE, I only have a single line. And Rose, if you go click on the repo, she has just way more. I think she has a function and like some print statements there as well. So Git tells me like, what would you like me to do? And the cool thing about doing this in IDE, it really gives you this nicer way of resolving conflicts. So you can actually resolve them from your command line. I don't like resolving them from command line because there's just, I don't like the UI. You will see this is much better. Here it really tells me, actually gives me like very easy options. I can just say like, hey, just take Rose's version, or like forget what you did, just take mine. So like that, when you would want to click accept yours, accept theirs. But if you double click on the file that Git is asking you about, we'll get this 3 options. So what's happening here in the middle, we will choose from either left, which is my version, or Rose's version. We'll choose what do we want to be in the final file that will be part of my change. Here, I will eventually just take all Rose's commands because, like clearly don't care for deleting her code, which would have happened if I accepted my version. And the way you do it, I think it's nicer than just like terminal. You'll basically click on little X's, or you'll click on little arrows and choose, do I want it to come from my set of changes, or do I want it to be whatever is saved on main? And I'm not sure if you discussed this, it's Git's way of signaling changes, or like really separating changes by commits, with the arrows going one way or the other way. So essentially, I'm just clicking on the double arrows to take all the Rose's changes into this final change, into this final file that I will add and commit. And then I'm saying like, don't take my changes, just take everything she has. And you can actually edit here stuff as well. It's a little bit of an editor of its own. So if you like something, and usually this ID will also tell you that like, hey, you were based successfully. I really like to double check. So I will actually go back to terminal, and you can see that it tells you rebase is in progress by saying like, hey, it's a rebase 1 of 1. So there's like one commit that we're trying to rebase. There's one commit that we're trying to resolve. And I will, again, I don't remember my shortcut, I think. Yeah, so, oh wait, actually I did remember here because it was right above, like git rebase continue. So that's what RC stands for. And it now, at this point, it tells me that it's successfully rebased and it successfully updated the merge conflict that we had. And then what's going to happen next, you see like the conflicts were resolved versus in the previous scenario, like sometime up above in the terminal was telling me like, hey, there was a merge conflict. You could not push until you resolve those conflicts. And then actually, funny enough, when I try to push now, this is what my shortcut is. PO is git push origin head. If you can see up above, I'm sorry, it's probably like not very good UI, but it's like the 7th one from the top. It will actually not let me because I think Rose has a git protection rule, so I don't have the permission to push to her branch, which is fine. That's like a normal thing to do. If we were collaborating on this, she would have probably given me access. 403 means unauthorized, so I'm unable to push, but had I been able to push, like I would have pushed up my branch and then created a PR from this. And that's actually all I had for you today. Let me know if you have any questions specifically about that demo. I'm also happy to go over the shortcuts. Go ahead.
Can you talk about like common issues that come along with rebasing, and like what is, I don't know if maybe I missed it, like defining what rebasing actually is?
We've got it coming up a little bit, but also on it if you want to talk about it now.
Sure. How about Rose? I give my version, and then if it's just like too fast or too unclear, you'll back me up. Rebasing in general means choosing the version that you want to be saved in Git. So rebasing means let's select the change that we think is right, because rebasing comes from a place where there are two versions in a single file typically, and Git doesn't know what is right. And Git will ask you, hey, I'm confused. Tell me, what is it that you want me to save? Because my job here is to save accurate information that you want to be saved. Does that make sense? Or do you have anything to add?
I can go, if we go back to our slides really quick. The next thing we talk about is ways to prevent merge conflicts and deal with them. The first two are kind of straightforward, having team members work on different files. And then when you're making a branch, make sure to branch off of the most recent version of main. And then the third one is rebasing. And then we go a little bit into what rebasing is. So this is a little diagram here on the right. And if you see this image in the center is like your code that you've been working on. So if you imagine like the yellow is main and the pink, magenta, I guess I'd say, is your branch. So you've made some changes to your branch. Other people have made some changes to main. And you sort of have two options at this point. You can merge, which is kind of like how we described it earlier, where you'll go on to main and you'll pull your magenta changes into main. And you could have a merge conflict there and you can like have to resolve it. Rebasing, on the other hand, from my understanding, is instead of adding your changes, like moving them into the most recent version, you're instead updating what version of main they're built off of. So instead of being built off of this old version of main, you can move your changes and have them being built off of this new version of main. Does that kind of track with what you were saying, Anna? Awesome.
I think the reason that that's helpful is because then instead of, part of why a merge conflict happens is because Git has like two different versions of the main that it's like comparing. And so if you have like this like top yellow dot as your version of main, and then they've made all these changes down along this like yellow path, when you try to like actually merge them, it's going to be comparing all this different stuff that has changed. Whereas if you update your version of main on your branch, then you don't have all these like other changes that are unrelated to your own change. So then when you merge it, it doesn't have to make all those weird comparisons. It just has to look at what you've changed. Does that make sense?
All right, so I can just read what it says on the left here as well. Rebasing is really pulling recent changes to main down to your branch, like we said in the diagram. And then it can, like, you're updating your version of main. So you're updating what magenta branch knows as this is the main that I'm working off of. Got a space for questions about that, merge conflicts, how to deal with them, how to prevent them. Delaney, are you frozen?
Yep.
Maybe try turning your video off. This next section is Delaney's, but if it has issues, I can definitely go over it.
Am I frozen? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you better now.
Okay. Okay, I'm just gonna try turning my camera on, see if that is okay. Okay, so if it's terrible, let me know. We're gonna talk about tools that you can use with GitHub to try to make, I can see how bad it is. I'm just gonna turn it off. Tools that you can use to make your workflow a little bit easier. Yeah. So some good examples that you can use some IDEs. And like Anna showed, you can use the like JetBrains IDEs like IntelliJ or PyCharm or anything like that. You can also use Git Cola, which Murphy loves, and I'm sure he would be happy to talk to you about it more in depth than what we're going to say. But it's kind of like a UI that is helpful for lots of different things, including like commits and stuff like that. And then there are lots of other things you can look at on, you know, if you do some research, figure out what your preferences are, stuff like that. So Anna obviously was using JetBrains, but we're going to talk about Visual Studio Code, which is, you know, it also has some like Git integration. So you can see over on the left side, there's a little thing that looks kind of like the fork like image, or maybe it's a branch. And then if you click on that, you can see all the changes that have been made. So down like underneath, you can see all changes, and those are maybe changes that haven't been tracked or aren't committed or aren't staged or whatever. And then above that, you can see changes that have been staged but haven't been committed. So it's nice, it's helpful. And then over on the side, on the like right-hand side, you can see they all have M's next to them, which is like VS is way of showing it doesn't modify. And then when you're also actually programming, you can see the tabs for each file are color-coded to give you some idea of like what the status of that file is. So if it's untracked, it'll be red and it has a little U. And if it's been modified, then it has the M and it's this like weird color, which is helpful. I hope I'm not super frozen. Can you still hear me?
It got a little choppy there in the middle. I think I heard most of it. A little choppy there in the middle.
Okay. Well, I'll just keep going.
If people can't hear Delaney,
Okay, you can go to the next one.
Like the surprised emoji. Delaney?
Yeah. I'm gonna disconnect and rejoin.
Okay, sounds good. While I'm waiting, we can poll the crowd. Does anyone have any favorite IDEs? VS Code is my favorite right now, but I haven't explored a lot of them. Emily likes VS Code, I see.
I like VS Code. Recent, actually, that I've been using it, but I do like it. What do you like about it?
The only one that I've used before VS Code was Eclipse, and I didn't really like Eclipse, so I think anything is a step up.
That is a good point. Eclipse has it has its benefits, but it's got some drawbacks.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. I think that I figured out what's going on, and it is that my computer is not charging. It's only 4% battery. I don't know what's going on there, but
it's still pretty choppy.
So yeah, so Rose, why don't you just talk about that?
Okay, I'm sorry. So the next thing, which I'm sure Murphy could maybe say a little bit more about, Git Cola is an add-on you can do. And it's a good way to resolve merge conflicts because it makes it really easy to sort of see changes similar to in Anna's demo. It sort of represents it in a visual way. That's a little bit easier than dealing with merge conflicts on the terminal. And then finally, we'll just show GitHub Marketplace, which has a bunch of different add-ons and things that you can install to make your GitHub workflow easier. So it really depends on what kind of projects you're working on, but scrolling through here, you can find a lot of things that might be of interest. We just have one last slide, which is some review about what we went over. These are sort of the 6 things that we talked about. Branching, which is, we would recommend you sort of work on your own feature branches. It helps organize team workflow. Forking, which you use if you're working on an open source project. It's similar to branching, but you're going to do it from the GitHub interface. And it makes a copy of someone's repository on GitHub that you own. And then we talked about merging, which is combining your work that you've been doing locally with the team's work. So merging your code into main, basically. We talked about rebasing, which is pulling recent changes down from main onto your local branch and seeing if you can update your version of main that your branch is working off of. We talked about merge conflicts, which can occur if multiple people edit the same file, or as Anna showed, create files with the same name. And they seem really scary. I know I was super scared about them the first time they happened, and I just completely deleted a file so that I would not have a merge conflict, but they're not too scary. They're manageable, and you just sort of have to go in and figure out what version of the changes you want. And then we talked about some tools that you can use to make Git easier. Would definitely recommend using IDEs because that really helps with integrating with Git. Thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you to Anna and Murphy for basically teaching Delaney and I Git. We really appreciate it. And we just want to open the room to questions. We have a couple of things that we could definitely talk about. We would be happy to run some more demos going through some of this stuff. Anna also kindly offered to talk about her GitHub shortcuts if that's of interest. And yeah, I will stop sharing my screen. Go for it, Emily.
Do you think you'd be willing to show another example of like dealing with a merge conflict?
Yeah, Anna, do you want to take that on, or would you like me to?
I'm not sure. I only prepared that demo, and it takes a little bit of a setup to actually create like what can be merging. Whereas, why don't you try?
Okay, let me give this a try. So I think you can see my terminal here. Clear this. So git status, just to show you what I'm up to right now. I'm currently on the branch fun. There's nothing to commit. I haven't made any changes since I most recently pushed. And oops, let's see. I have so many things open on this computer. In order to make a merge conflict, I'm going to want to probably edit this file in 2 different branches. So I think you can see fun over here. I'm just going to add another call to duplicate strings, and we'll say dog. What this file is doing is it prints the numbers 1 through 9, and then it duplicates the string and prints it out. So now I've made that change. If I run git status again, it's going to say, hey, you've modified fun.py. I can do git add fun.py. If I run git status, I like to run git status pretty much every time I do a command, just to see what I did and confirm that I did it right. So now you can see fun.py is in green, which means I've staged it. And then I can do commit, and I'll say added a call to print dogs. That's just a little message. You probably want to be a little bit more diligent about your messages when you're writing them in actuality, but this works for now. So now that's committed. I think if I run git status, it shows me here that my branch is one ahead of what I have on GitHub. So I can do git push to push those changes up to GitHub. So now they're there. And if I do git status, it says you and GitHub are in sync. So now if I switched to a new branch, check out -b fun 2. So now I am on this new branch and I can make some changes on my new branch. If I come back over here, I can delete this function. And if I run git status, it'll say, hey, you modified the file. That makes sense. I'll do that git add and git commit. -m removed. Actually, I just realized this isn't going to work because I should delete the call to git print nums as well, since I deleted the function. So I want to unstage that change that I just did. And it's saying run git restore.
Actually, Rose, I think since you haven't committed it, you can just run git add and it will capture all the changes you've made since your last add.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks. So that should be up to date. And then I'll do git commit. Deleted print nums function. So when I run git push here, it's going to say, hey, there's an issue. And the reason that it has that issue is because I created this new branch and it doesn't have something on GitHub that tracks with it. So it'll give us, it's very nice, as Delaney said earlier, and it'll give us this new command to run. And if I went over, I don't think I'm sharing my GitHub page. Let me also share. Oh no. Sorry, my Zoom game is not as good as I would like it to be. Thanks, Emily. Okay, I think now you can see this, right? Beautiful. So if I go to GitHub Workshop, you can see, oh, Fun has some recent pushes. Fun 2 has some recent pushes. We've got all these new branches. If we click on Fun, we can see it has this version with the dog. And if we click on Fun 2, we can see it has this versions without whatever that function was called, print nums. So if I just quickly go to main and I decide, okay, I want to pull the changes from Fun in. So pull the changes from Fun into main. Normally you would write some stuff here, but I'm just gonna not do anything. And then I'll click merge pull request. So this is the way that you would do it. You would typically do this more if you were doing a fork. Yeah, Emily, what's up?
If you're working with like a team, would you be the person who does that, or would you have someone review it first?
Yeah, I think that depends on what kind of team you're working with. Like I'm doing a project with a few people right now, and I think we all have permission. But if you're working with a team and you are like an intern or a lackey, I think then someone else would review it. You would make that pull request, but that second slide, or page where I said like confirm merge or whatever the message said. I think someone else would be doing that if it wasn't my project. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So now if we switch to main, I see something in the chat. You can also incorporate code review. Yeah. Yeah, so that's why someone else might want to look at it before you just go for it. So now in main, you can see that it now has the duplicate strings command. Oh, more in the chat. True. It has the duplicate strings call with dog. So now, if I went back here, I'm just going to clear this just to confirm. So I'm on branch 2. I'm pretty sure I committed my stuff on branch 2. And now if I switch to main, check out main. Now I'm on main. And then if I did git merge fun2, I think this will have, no, it didn't have a merge conflict. That surprises me.
But actually, Ross, if you try to create a pull request from your fun branch, right? So if you go back and you try to actually like, oh, sorry, on your fun too, try to create a pull request, and I think it should tell you that there is a conflict now.
Oh, I guess it's happy with it. Maybe I needed to mess with the files a little bit more. Sorry about that.
Okay, we're seeing the workflow, which is nice.
Yeah, sorry. I think maybe if I did mess with different lines, and maybe if I had messed with similar lines, it would have been more upset. So now if I'm back on main, yeah, so main no longer has that, and it was totally happy deleting that. I don't know if that was helpful or not. Sorry that didn't quite work out.
That was helpful, and maybe afterwards I might walk through an example.
Actually, to keep it more fun, I know we're over time, but Emily, can you think of a scenario when it would have created a merge conflict, or anybody? Probably if we try to pull like one of the branches into the other, it would have said like, hey, do you want to incrementally add this change, or do you want me to just take either or? Hypothetically, but I can also leave it as like a little homework for you to figure out if you want to. I'm happy to like go over it as well.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe I'll check that out.
I'm happy to send that repository to people if people just want to completely mess with it. It doesn't have any meaning. I think that's what we got for today then. Thank you everyone for coming. I hope this helped a little bit. I think running over GitHub commands over and over again is like the best way to learn it. So hopefully this at least gave you a little exposure.
All right, thank you so much, Rose, Delaney, and Anna for, or Anna, sorry, for coming. We really appreciate y'all sharing with us some of your wisdom. And thank you everyone who came and learned, we hope. I'll be sending out the slides and some resources from this talk afterwards, so keep an eye out for your email.